Good evening, everybody. Notwithstanding that if you look around the clocks in this room, everything's reading slightly differently at the moment, but it's on average 6:30. And good evening to the public and members. This is the EPH meeting this evening, the first of two this week. And I'm going to run through a few administrative issues that we always do on occasions like this. There are no planned fire alarms for this evening. Fire evacuation procedures. Therefore, if the fire alarm does sound, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. I ask you to go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. The meeting is being webcast, and it's confirmed it's live. And on mobile phones, could I ask all members of the public and members to switch off to silent or turn off your phones? Thank you. Could I have any declarations of, apologies for absence and substitutions. I think there's just one substitution this evening. And all right, Councillor Robinson substituted by Councillor Laura. Any declarations of interest on matters on the agenda? Councillor Looney?
Just to say that I don't know whether I need to do this, but I do receive a pension from Stonham Housing.
Thank you. So noted. There are no urgent items presented for this evening. And there is item 4 on the agenda, the appointment of a vice chairman. Currently there is no vice chairman to this committee, and could I ask, as per the constitution, are there any nominations for vice chair? Being no nominations, we will leave that position vacant and move on. And we look at the minutes now on item number 5 of the committee meeting held on the 15th of June 2015. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask for two matters arising on page 4 of 59 and 5 of 59? The first bullet point on 4 of 59 relates to our conversation about the roundabouts. And I know officers took away the comments from all sides of the committee the strategic work that we were doing set against the work the county were doing. The county have gone ahead with their consultations and their motoring with their intention for their changes to the roundabouts. Is there any feedback that we could have on that particular bullet point from officers to come back to us? They did say they would. So it would be a useful exercise, I think, if they could do that. And similarly so, 5 of 59 related to our conversation about head teachers. And again, officers gave an undertaking to come back to us. So if we could chase both of those, I would appreciate it.
Certainly we'll go back to them, because I, like you, are very interested in both those particular topics. I certainly attended the last consultation on the roundabouts, and I think it's probably a bit too soon to come back. I don't know, but we will inject it back in the system to get a response fed back to this committee and the members on this committee from those officers. Councillor Mr. James.
I don't know if I've missed it, but I did ask a question regarding of the officer about staircasing and Manydown, and they said that they would come back and explain what that entails. I'd quite like to know a timescale to that, and what their model is going to be and how that's going to work in relation to Manydown.
Point taken, so noted, and we will approach the officers and give you the feedback. On that basis, is it accepted I sign the minutes from the previous meeting? Thank you. Item number 6, supporting people, homelessness services. Now, the portfolio holder is here tonight, Councillor Mrs. Reid, as is Kate Randall, who's the housing officer, and supported by Karina Christensen. Now, also, we have a public speaker tonight, Mr. Mike Browning. Mr. Browning, could I ask you just to sit in the seat there? We'll get an introduction from the officer and the portfolio holder, and then I will call you to have your 2 minutes in due course. Don't press anything.
Thank you, Chair.
Just can you press it delete that. Thank you. Just relax for a few minutes. And the officer like to present the paper? Or do you want it, how you want to do it between yourselves? Yeah, or what, Councillor Cubitt?
Just to ask whether there's anyone from Hampshire County Council here tonight.
No, there isn't. But I've got a feeling most of your questions about that could well be answered this evening. I just suspect something because I've had questions about Hampshire County Council as well. We'll see as we progress. We can always put it onto the record and get any answers that you might have later on.
Just as a preamble before anything starts, just because I don't know who has the statutory responsibility, when I read the papers, what seemed to me to be the case, and I'm obviously ignorant, I'm sure a lot of you know the answer to this, but is it Hampshire County Council has outright statutory responsibility, or do we have joint responsibility? And then with that in mind, then I'll understand the narrative that comes out of the papers and tease out that central message.
On that particular point only, have you got a comment on that, Kate?
In relation to homelessness, the Borough Council has the statutory housing duties as the strategic and statutory housing authority. The Supporting People programme is a non-statutory programme of services, so it's a discretionary range of services, albeit that it supports the delivery of other statutory functions, which wouldn't just include district councils. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. We're coming forward with this paper this evening. I think most members are fairly sure of the sort of detail that we've been through for the last year or so, so I'll just give a very brief background rather than going over it in massive detail. I think it was about a year ago, or over a year ago actually, I think last June, we had a full members workshop here on supporting people when we were facing a proposal of cuts from Hampshire County Council. Many members attended, obviously expressed concerns. We managed to get a stay of execution, if you will, for a year before the cuts were implemented. So we spent the last year on several threads, if you like. We've been working with Hampshire County Council to try at many different levels to engage with them and try to put our case to them in terms of getting the best possible deal we could from funding, being aware, of course, that we knew the cuts were coming inevitably, and also on the model that they're proposing as well. And then we've also been working with members, so we've had a map going for the last year. Some members here have been part of that map. Papers have been distributed widely and have been on the portal too, so that information has been there for those who wanted to engage with it. And we've been also engaging with partners, providers, etc., and tried to keep that conversation as wide as possible. So the Hampshire proposals that they finally came forward with in detail earlier this summer would have meant that there would have been a reduction in funding, and also that there would be an end to the Joshua Tree, because Hampshire have no statutory responsibility for homeless families, so they were wanting to step away from that completely. And also, with the funding that they're proposing for us, they built a new model, which was a kind of sub-regional model, and the May Place, which of course is vital to us in terms of being our homeless hostel and vital as part of a general overview of our homelessness services, would again have become a sub-regional hostel. So other districts would have had nomination rights for May Place, and May Place has limited capacity, obviously, so you can see the problems that would have ensued from that. And also, we could have ended up with it silting up, basically, because we would not have had the move on for those people who were coming in from other districts. So clearly, we were in a position where we wanted to say no to those proposals that wouldn't have helped us in any way whatsoever. So we went back with the proposition that they give us the money still for 3 years, but allow us to shape a new kind of service, a service which hopefully will draw in support from partners, from charities, from churches. These conversations have been led by Karina, who's done a fantastic job over the last few months trying to get that together. Businesses, we're also now finding that partners on a wider level are interested also, so health, police, probation, because everyone obviously has an investment, if you like, in homelessness and what happens. So we hope that if we move forward with a new model, that we will find buy-in from partners quite widely on that. And it would also give us the ability to shape the services, because one thing we've done over the last year is a strategic review of the existing services to have a look at what are our absolute bottom lines, what are our lines in the sand, what are the things that we absolutely have to maintain. And we've looked at those, and we've also seen that there is capacity, in fact, to possibly improve some of these services as well, which we could do, given the funding and given the ability to actually shape them a little bit better, working more widely with partners. So you have 3 proposals on the table. We really just want your thoughts. We're not at sort of decision point this evening, but we would like your thoughts and your opinions on them. We could do absolutely nothing, and just go with the Hampshire model with the risks associated to May Place and the Joshua Tree. We could attempt simply to replicate the services as they are at the moment, which would probably not be sustainable financially. And also, as I said, we've already looked at through our strategic review that there are ways of improving those services. Or we can attempt to shape our own destiny, take the 3-year funding that we have from Hampshire and attempt to build a better service which draws in wider buy-in from partners, and hopefully provides a service which is better for Basingstoke and for our residents. So I think that's probably all I want to say at the moment. Kate?
Nothing more to add? Okay. Before we go on to questions, because I'm going to do this on the usual basis, questions back to officers on the report, I'm going to invite Mr. Browning. You have 2 minutes to address the committee, Mr. Browning. Off you go, and we've got a timer going, so I'll give you a bit of notice, okay?
Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity to speak about the Homeless Support Services report. I'm a volunteer and trustee of the Camrose Centre, which is Basingstoke's charity for the homeless and vulnerably housed. The report mentioned the voluntary sector twice. Firstly, as previously untapped resources, and secondly, as a potential source of funding. I'd like to explain what Camrose did last year and will be doing for our clients again tomorrow morning. Firstly, we're grateful for the commitment by the Council, who have given us a commitment for 3 years to the value of £46,000. The charity's budget for the same period is £120,000, and the difference will be made up by cash donations from individuals, churches, businesses, and other community-based charities. We also currently engage a fundraiser on a payment by results basis. The grants from BDBC will pay approximately 70% of the costs of 2 professional employees for 28 hours a week. This allows the charity to deploy over 70 hours a week of volunteer effort to provide services directly to our clients. Volunteers are aged 18 to 80 and recruited from a wide range of backgrounds. They're resourced with donations of food, hygiene-packed items, clothing and camping equipment worth hundreds of pounds a week. The charity also has...
You have half a minute, Mr. Browning.
We also have patrons who will provide, if we give a good business plan, we will get investment in our charity. In 2014-15, we had 169 named clients and 69 were new. The outcomes for these included 52 people housed, 47 with improved self-esteem, and 27 with improved budgeting ability. Camrose is not the only model for a homeless charity. Emmanuel House, Nottingham and the Gatehouse Oxford are just 2 examples in larger cities.
If I could ask you to wind up, please.
We're keen to innovate for the benefit of the homeless and vulnerably housed in Basingstoke, and we'll hope to be able to continue with BDBC in this key area.
Thank you very much, Mr. Browning. For the members' benefit, the full text of Mr. Browning's talk tonight, I think it goes on for a bit longer, will be circulated by email to all members of the committee. Does anyone? I'll go a little bit further and say yes, Councillor Chair.
Well, we have a choice. I mean, we've got one topic, one speaker, and I'd like to hear a bit more of what he's got to say. So you could either allow him a bit more time, given you have that gift as a chair, or I can ask a question to the speaker saying, is there anything else he'd like to say?
I have a further question coming from you. I've already discussed this with Mr. Browning before the meeting. But as I say, the full text of what he's got to say will be distributed to you.
A minute more maximum.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Certainly. Just to explain what the Camrose Centre does, it opens 4 hours a week at St Michael's Church site. It provides a self-service breakfast bar, hot lunch, washing facilities and a warm, dry, safe place. It offers one-to-one assistance to clients who may be rough sleeping, sofa surfing or facing eviction or are in other ways vulnerably housed. Support includes signposting to statutory and voluntary services, referral to other agencies, advice on drugs, alcohol and substance abuse, advice on benefits, health, family and personal organisation. We also host First Point, Stonham and the Housing Department, and have an excellent working relationship with the May Place outreach staff. I think that concludes the main points I wanted to put forward. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs James.
In relation to the people that come in and use the centre, do they have a local connection? Have they lived in Basingstoke or been in Basingstoke, not lived, but are they known to Basingstoke for some time, or are they people coming into Basingstoke?
It's a complete mixture. Sometimes we'll get people who've been here for years and have lost their home but through substance abuse or marriage breakdown. On the other hand, we may get people travelling through. But one of the questions we always try to establish is access to local services, what their entitlement is. So it's all everything. We don't turn people away on the grounds of whether they've got a local connection or not.
And can I ask, over a period of time, have you seen an increase in the number of people using your centre?
As you might expect, it's seasonal, but we had a fairly quiet winter, and then around April time we saw an increase in numbers using the centre as a whole. We were getting numbers up to 35 per session, and of those, last week we had 34 in the session and 16 were rough sleepers. So certainly we've seen a peak in the last 6 months, or an increase in the last 6 months. We've got a capacity at any one time of 35 people, and therefore when we get to that stage it has to be on a one-in, one-out basis, but we try to make sure that each person who comes in is fed and has access to services.
Thank you very much. As this is, I think will involve a little bit of dialogue before we go into the debate, and we've got the portfolio holder here and the housing staff. Are there any questions with reference to the report to our three ladies on my left for clarification points, or because, as was said by the portfolio holder, we've gone through this, I've been on the map myself. This has been going on for a year. This is the culmination of a lot of interaction between the council, stakeholders, members, the whole lot. But right now in the committee, are there any questions? And Councillor Mrs James, followed by Councillor Looney, followed by Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you. Got quite a lot of questions, so you can stop me and I'll come back. But the first one is in relation to the Joshua tree, because I think there was an article in the paper this week.
Is this to do with the report or articles and papers, Councillor James?
It's to do with the report.
Thank you.
It relates to the paper, which differs to the report. So
I think if we stick to the report, I'm sorry, but
No,
national papers are not the reports produced by
paper.
officers.
It's not a national paper, it's the Gazette.
Well,
what I was asking...
I'm sorry, Councillor Mr James. We're here to look at this report and to choose one of three options. I'm afraid I have to take newspaper reports with a very great pinch of salt. I'm talking about a report produced by professional officers here for your benefit and for the benefit of the rest of the members of this meeting.
Could you give us an update, possibly whoever, on the status of the Joshua tree, please?
I can tell you as much as I know today, but we obviously refer to the Joshua Tree in the paper. So even though proposals to save the Joshua Tree will be part of a separate decision, obviously the impetus for changes at the Joshua Tree came from the supporting people changes as they started to be rolled out from Hampshire. Suffice to say, there is no prospect of SP funding for the Joshua Tree, whether there was a local model or within the Hampshire model. What we knew from our strategic review is that whilst the Joshua Tree has an incredibly valuable role to play, there were areas where we could increase its strategic relevance and outcome. So there was some work that we could do with Sovereign there. But it's also been quite clear, officers recommending to sort of members to consider the value of the Joshua Tree. Quite clear that this is not a scheme that we can simply allow to close, not without putting lots of effort in. And we have been in dialogue with Sovereign Housing Association, and that the work that has come out of the commissioning group, COG2, in terms of trying to source some alternative temporary accommodation to avoid bed and breakfast. Obviously, there's a clear synergy with the work that was happening on supporting people. So we now are at the position with Sovereign where we both, which is really positive news, have a mutual commitment to ensuring that that scheme can continue to offer temporary accommodation to homeless households. That's our starting point. We're meeting with them shortly to agree key sort of heads of terms, subject to a subsequent contractual discussion, which would be the subject of a cabinet decision later on in the autumn. Timescales are really short because the funding for the Joshua Tree runs out at the end of March, and it's not a case of this is something we'd like to look into. We need to have a model on the table, but obviously that will be reported back either through members or through decisions moving forward to cabinet. But suffice to say, there is a commitment on both parties to not just to retain services at the Joshua Tree, but to ensure that they deliver in everyone's mutual interest. That's service users, Sovereign, and the council.
Can I ask in relation to that, is that regardless of whichever option, or is that relating to one option? And on page 17, when it talks about, in the circumstance, the options in respect of the Joshua Tree, assume revenue funding responsibility of the service, but recommission in a way that meets strategic and statutory homeless priorities more effectively. Is that what you're talking about there? Sorry.
And then the work dovetails with what's come out of the COG as well. So in terms, those are the options that we as a council have for the Joshua Tree as it stands at this point in time. We either take over funding completely, we either just allow it to close, or we come up with something that meets our strategic needs and objectives more closely, and also explores other revenue funding streams as well. So that's the option that's moving forward.
Can I just push you on? And does that relate to any options, and whichever option we decide tonight is the Joshua Tree, or is that relating to option 3 or
That's irrespective of what Cabinet decides to do in terms of the 3 options for the rest of the supported housing sector.
and that is going to be supporting families as is now, or is there going to be any changes to that?
It actually supports a range of households, so there's some single people and couples in the Joshua Tree as well, but it's essentially it will be homeless households or households that are likely to become homeless, if you like, through prevention. We would be looking for 100% nominations, and the service spec would be different to how things have been under supporting people. So it is quite a significant change, but it's one that arguably has much improved outcomes, particularly in terms of throughput through the scheme.
Now, I'll pass this on now to Councillor Loomy. Pardon.
Okay, I'm sorry if this might sound as I'm being difficult because it's my first time here, but housing I do have knowledge about. And I'm quite concerned, although it's a very good report, except there's bits that don't meet, for me, the due diligence. For me to make a decision, for me to be satisfied under due diligence, I need to fully understand on the housing, I think it's Stonham and another one, there's 44 people, but there's nothing in the report advising me what risk these people are at, what sort of support they get in terms of, are we talking here of people with mental health problems, either severe or enduring? Are we talking about people with substance misuse? So therefore, the sort of level of support they're getting, if under the supporting people cuts, and that's not something we can avoid, is therefore the support that's going to go to them going to be cut? And therefore, what are the risks? And you have put risks in here, that's why I'm saying it's a good report, but the risks for me are, if we cut support to some of those people whose needs are great, and because I don't know that, because I don't have that information, I just wonder, what are the risks to those people who live in the vicinity of those group homes? And I'm assuming they're still multiple occupancy houses. And I just wonder what the risks are by cutting the support networks. And I know you've got to do it, so I'm not sort of being difficult. I just wonder whether we have taken, under due diligence, what the risks are to the people who live around the houses when the services may be cut. Oh, sorry.
Each scheme within the portfolio of supported services that we have available to us is different. In particular relation to group homes, there was an understanding, supported by the findings of the strategic review, that not all of the property portfolios, the properties within that portfolio of group homes, were particularly relevant or suitable for supported housing use moving forward. So what we did in terms of, rather than looking at this from existing service users, we looked at this from the point of view of what the strategic contribution of that particular service could offer the borough in years to come. So we looked at the portfolio of properties, the range of properties within that portfolio, and identified the ones that would have a strategic relevance. So, for example, a 4-bedroomed HMO has much less strategic relevance, even though it offers 4 bed spaces, than say a 2-bedroom, because the risks associated with 2 people sharing would be less than with 4 people sharing. So what we've actually done with that portfolio is go through and discuss with Stonham the optimum properties that we think should be retained, because there was not a suggestion. This isn't just about making up numbers in terms of just ensuring we have the same number of bed spaces and capacity. If a type of service and a range of property types don't meet the purpose for which they're intended, then there's no point in trying to continue to use them. And in fact, in the group homes, there were experiences of lots of voids where it wasn't a service model that service users wanted. So in terms of risks, I'm not sure how I can answer the question in terms of risk for the individual service users. Support would be available as necessary to sustain people with low-level support needs in that accommodation. It's a stage 2 accommodation, so it's naturally a move on from the stage 1 hostel accommodation. So what was the specific question on risk?
It's about the risk to the people. If that support is cut, I'm just thinking, if the support is cut, therefore people may become unwell quicker, all sorts of areas of risk. And it's not the risk to the people that are in the houses, it's the risk to the local area in which they are set in.
It's quite a difficult question to answer, because what I guess the overriding risk that we're taking into account when framing the various options is what's the risk to the community, and much wider if there's insufficient support to prevent people from becoming homeless. So there's that broader risk. And one of the options, which is the option to look at developing a local model, could be perceived as being the one that mitigates the risk to the greatest extent in terms of that has the most opportunity to minimise risks and meet local needs. In terms of risk to the community of particular properties in particular locations, when we looked at the remaining portfolio, that would have taken into account issues like how well those schemes and services are functioning in their current location. So there wouldn't be a recommendation to retain services where there is a risk of those services not being able to deliver.
Councillor Gavin James.
There's two questions. One is very much on the report, and it's table 10 in appendix something. Appendix 2, it's that one.
Page number?
It hasn't got a page
Hasn't
number.
got a page number?
No. So there's a question about...
Would you like to stop right there? There are certain pages within this report that will ensure that this committee will go into restricted session, and you just picked one.
In that case, tell me later, and I'll move on to my second question.
It's quite a long list,
Yeah.
and I leave it to the judgment of the housing officer to identify it if anybody brings it up.
Yeah, it was only some of
We're
them.
being ultra cautious on this. It's to do with numbers.
I'll ask that question offline at some point. The next question is, you mentioned, I think it's really to Terry, Councillor Reid, you mentioned looking at further funding, looking at whether business will come and sponsor us and charities will come and sponsor us. And I think it's wonderful if we can get it. The problem is we're already relying on the county council to give us funding, and they can just cut it and drop it whenever they like. It's even more dangerous when you're relying on third sector agencies who can just have a change of director and decide they're not going to grant us that money every year. Are we going to design a service where we say, this is the critical line, this is the lowest level of service that we can provide that keeps our community safe and offers sufficient support to our residents, and if we don't get third-party funding, well, then the borough will have to top it up? Or is there a risk that we are becoming over-reliant on the third sector chipping in, and if the third sector doesn't give us what we want, we're going to have to cut further and deeper than what's outlined in the reports already?
Yes, there is that risk, clearly. We have 3 years funding from HCC, so if you like, we have 3 years to try and put a package together. And the whole point of trying to do this is that, as we're all aware, local government funding is fairly precarious. So any service that we have, which is entirely dependent on local government funding, is not sustainable long term. So that's why we have to look to draw in other agencies, and that's why that synergy with the police, health, probation, as well as businesses, as well as charities, as well as churches, is vitally important, and that's why we're having those discussions. I'm just wondering whether, Karina, if you have anything to add on that as well, because you've been leading a lot of those discussions, haven't you?
Hi there. Some of the work that we've been doing has been to try and identify areas where there's not necessarily a financial return, but services could be delivered more effectively and efficiently. So ultimately, there could be a reduction in cost without there being compromise to service delivery. If I gave you an example, we have 3 current service providers. All 3 will need to ensure that they have a mechanism by which they consult with their clients or tenants. That will have a cost attached to it, because each individual agency will attribute an officer some room space, etc. Doing things locally and in a Basingstoke way, we could minimise that to just one vehicle where 3 parties join together. We also can explore and cement relationships with colleagues at the Camrose, for example, who are not part of the supporting people delivery vehicle currently, and yet there's so much synergy between the agencies operating in Basingstoke and the work that happens at the Camrose. We've yet to explore proper conversations with businesses rather than third sector agencies around corporate social responsibility and social value. So there is as yet untapped exploration of what could be brought to the table. I hope that goes some way to offer some reassurances.
Just by way of supplementary, I totally agree, and I should declare an interest. The probation service have been mentioned. I work for the National Probation Service, but I have nothing to do with offender management and dealing with housing directly. And I do see there's clearly a situation where often the support that's offered around drug and alcohol service is actually what's available through the NHS and the County Council through Jacob's House. People on probation orders or orders to the provider of probation services, as we're supposed to say now, is there dual support, is there 2 lots of support, and you do meet people who have got key workers, case workers, support workers, probation officers, social workers, leaving care workers, and there's a whole load of people that you think there's not overlap, which by bringing it all together more tightly, we can get out some overlap. So I see some positive benefits of working in that way, for sure. I'm just a little bit worried that are we going to be here in 3 years' time, because obviously the county have dropped it, and we know where the county are going with this. We can read this document, Wider Hampshire. It doesn't mention supporting people or homeless or vulnerable people once. It talks about economy, buses, trains. That's all the county are interested in. People aren't particularly relevant to them. We're aware of that, and we're in that direction of travel. Are we going to be lumbered with a very big bill in 3 years' time when the county say the last of the funding's now gone? Are we ready to pick up the pieces? I mean, we haven't got a lot of choice, but I want that commitment, because we talk about, you know, these idiots who come along and say, oh, we've frozen council tax, aren't we wonderful? Well, actually, we only have council tax to provide services, and there's some services so critical that we don't want to lose them. It's easy to cut taxes. Freezing taxes, nothing. You can cut taxes. The government can cut taxes. We just stop having NHS. But nobody wants that because it's really important. Are we ready as a council to say that if we don't get the money from other sources, if there's still a cost there, we'll have to go to the residents and say it's going to cost you all 10p a week to provide this service, but we think it's critical, because ultimately that's the decision we've got to make.
Shall I say something first, and then I guess the quick answer is that we don't know, because we don't know where we're going to be in 3 years' time. We don't know where we're going to be in terms of what decisions the county will take. We don't know where we'll be in terms of demand and need and where we are. And plus, we don't know what opportunities this pilot can create and generate. What we will do when we're looking at producing the detailed business model is obviously milestone in some scope for review to see where we are and to try to make some informed predictions around, you know, what income source is likely to have more legs on it than others. So it's being aware of that risk. I guess if you were to say, in terms of the other options on the table, if the other option is to do nothing and go in with the county model now, those are still the decisions that we would have to be taking in 3 years' time. So no one can sit here and promise that you'll always have a sort of bountiful supply of perpetually funded services, and there will always be ways of improving and delivering services more effectively. Even since we've started having the conversations over the last sort of 6 months, the different ideas that have been coming to the table and the opportunities that we didn't think were necessarily available from other public sector partners for joint funding have presented, and we'd never sort of tabled that in. We had assumed most of the revenue opportunities would come either through the private sector or through the working with the voluntary sector. So it's not an answer, but it's sort of an explanation.
It's going back to the money. We started this journey when the supporting people budget was going through what it's going through. And if, from memory, we were talking about sort of elderly people services at the point where the county had already done a consultation with old people about what buzzers they had in their houses and things like that. So the county are very good at waking up one morning going, I know what we'll do, and then you kind of deal with the fallout after. Is there a commitment from the county that we've got this for 3 years, and that's fantastic, and I think it does give us that security and give us 3 years of breathing space to really design and develop our own services and get as many of those efficiencies and true efficiencies rather than cuts out of it. But have we got a commitment from the county that they will be reviewing this budget in 18 months' time or in a year's time? So we've got a long lead in, because counties seem to have this habit of just saying, I know, we'll just cut that bus service, cut that home, and till you've got £300,000 less as of next Tuesday. We kind of need that commitment that we've got time to work on this, you know what I mean?
We've got as good as it gets in terms of a promise to give us 3 years, which obviously that will always be subject to any ongoing sort spending review. What we are both committed to doing is optimising the opportunities through this pilot. So the county took no persuading in terms of much as we'd like to claim that they did. They didn't take much persuading in terms of being agreeable to offer us a grant at a level that we would justifiably be able to sort of run with this model, because you know, that they're just as keen to see things work locally as we are. We were just the only district to take the opportunity to do that. So we've got as much as we can get, and there will always be cross-fertilisation in terms of them working strategically with us on our project, and likewise we will also be part of the bigger county picture, even though it doesn't include our service delivery, and just keeping ears to the ground and being as reactive as we can be and as we have been so far.
Just really to add to what Kate was saying, I can't foresee a time when we don't have that statutory responsibility towards homelessness. So we will always have this problem in front of us, and if that is why it's in our interest to move towards a sustainable model if we can, because if we do nothing, we still pick up the bill. We still pick up the impact on our residents and on our services across the board. So we have to try and find a way of making it work.
Councillor Richards.
Yes, thank you. I was going to go down the same line that Councillor James went down. What happens after this 3 years and so on. And I think, to be honest, you pretty well answered that. But I mean, that was a concern if it just suddenly stops. But in your negotiations with county, you said they were fairly easy to get the amount, or whatever. Therefore, I take it that there will be a clear intention for them to continue supporting us in at least a fairly moderate way. That's one question. I also have another little detailed question, which is just on this page 16 of 59, that table there, where you spell out the different amounts the potential BDBC spend, and then you talk on the left-hand column, application 1, 2, and 3. You talk about dampening, full dampening, no dampening. I was a bit confused by that. I'm at least unsure what that means.
It's been a very long year. In terms, so the first question was in relation to
I think actually more it's answered. I mean, I think when you were answering Councillor James's question, I mean, I was going to go down that same line of question, and I think I accept what you've said so far, and that's fine.
Yeah, the county, in terms of trying to come up with a redistributive formula for the entire supporting people money that they were going to allocate, if you go back into some of the history in the report around how this money was determined, it came through lots of different funding sources and lots of historical patterns of delivery. The county very much wanted to have a formulaic approach, and so it derived a formula using public health determinants and also population determinants, and then applied that across the county and said, and what would that look like? And the picture looked quite stark. In terms of no dampening, the raw formula, application 3, is the financial deal that would have been on the table had they simply applied the formula. And then they dampened it down to lesser the impact, I guess in recognition of the fact that we were transitioning from a historic profile of services to one which was formulaic. So then they dampened it to 50% and 75%. What we've put with application 1 is the full dampening, and that's the offer that's been made to us. Application 2 in between is where they applied their formula, and they also because there was some concern on their part to ensure that there were direct access services available throughout North Hampshire, that there would be a further, penalty's not the right word, but that there would be another allowance needed to be made to provide those services elsewhere in North Hampshire. Whatever your view on that, what the ultimate agreement was that actually that wouldn't come out of Basingstoke's lot, and the county council would fund it. So yeah, very much so. The report suggesting that in the circumstances that is the best deal we might have hoped for within a sort of funding cut scenario.
Councillor Kewitt.
Thank you. It's an excellent report, thank you very much. And I mean, personally, I think option 3 has to be the only way forward, and I commend the council for being proactive and looking at how we can do things better, more intelligently, multidisciplinary. It's got to be the way forward. And even in the private sector, we don't stand still. We evolve and evaluate and change and modify. The thing that worries me more is this. It's still historic. I mean, it's historic. So there's nothing that we can change. But I don't quite understand why Basingstoke and Dean's total spend is 19% of the HCC total spend. And there's a reference on page 12 of 59 that the redistribution of our grants to other boroughs is pronounced, and that's why we didn't get support in the negotiations. I wonder whether you could discuss further those comments made.
Can you point to...
Sorry, it's clause 3.6.2 and 3.7.1 on page 12 of 59, and the reference to the 19% is on 16 of 59 and 3.9.4.
Historically, Basingstoke had a very favourable share of the homelessness services around the county because of the historical reasons. What happened in terms of the way that the review was being suggested with the formulaic redistribution and the types of services that were likely to be unfunded in the future just meant that disproportionately we were receiving a bigger cut than other districts. What the report is suggesting in terms of option 3 is that whilst we still have a disproportionate cut, we still, as a single district, attract more funding than any other sole district. It's quite difficult to compare like with like because they're now moving into a sort of sub-regional pattern. I'm not sure whether that answers your question.
Sorry, no, it doesn't really, because, I mean, in terms of our population and our levels of deprivation and the needs of our community, I would find it unusual for Hart or Rushmore to need more than us, but maybe I don't know those districts as well as I know our borough. And the fact that we spend 19%, what's the figure here? It says 90% still represents the highest single district amount of spend would kind of back that up, which would mean to me that it's bizarre that there has been this reallocation. If we're spending the most, it would suggest that their formula is inaccurate, because it would suggest to me that the need has not been replicated in the formula.
Yeah, we had significant issues with the use of a formula, particularly that was predominantly population-based in terms of just numbers within the population. There was also some impact for indices of deprivation and worklessness. They put all of that into the melting pot and then came out with a figure and redistributed the pot. I think the county, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the county, but the county's view was that the historical delivery had reflected factors other than need, and it was very difficult to come up with a objective measure of need for things like housing-related services. They weren't happy to look at homelessness indicators, or housing registers can vary from district to district, so you wouldn't necessarily be comparing like to like for like. So they wanted to come up with a formula that they felt comfortable represented the outcomes they were trying to achieve from this. And I know it's not a satisfactory explanation, but it's very difficult to apply a formula which is population-laden when you have historical funding over.
Sure, okay, so thank you very much, Giles. All I would say to Councillor Reid is the evidence would suggest that we've been stitched up and stuffed. And I know for a fact from the housing, historically, building rates in other boroughs, as do you indeed, and as does your husband, that we've been building significantly more social housing than even the number of houses being built per se in Hart and Rushmore. So by definition, the fact that we're building housing, affordable housing, social housing, that it exceeds the number of housing that's been built in any shape, size or form by Hart or Rushmore, would suggest that we have greater needs in this area. And therefore it seems to me that if you only look at the population and you look at the fancy houses built on the side of the M3 in the Elvertham, you know, the likelihood of who's going to have the greater homelessness need, when we've been building 300 social housing per annum until relatively recently, would suggest it's slightly potty. And I very much hope that your cabinet and your leader, you know, are able at some stage to advise us that you have been fighting the case of the the people of Basingstoke, because what I'm terrified of, finally, is that I think this is absolutely a taste of things to come with regards to the discussions of the devolved authority. Because if we have nonsensical formulas applying, misinterpreting evidence, which is blatantly, I mean, it's patently obvious from the stats here, and I'm not an expert, that whomever devised the formula isn't looking at the truth of the facts. And so whilst I commend you for being proactive, whilst I commend you and the Cabinet for doing what you are doing, I am very concerned about your, not your personally, but your inability as a Cabinet to negotiate and represent the interests of our borough as strongly as I would expect, given that Hart and Rushmore have had more distributive monies given to them.
Just to add one thing, other background, that yes, Basingstoke and Deane had historically high proportionate levels of spend. Probably the other districts would be first to point out that they had next to nothing. So it really was a massive redistribution. Now, that's not to give any justification, it's just an explanation of why the formula resulted in such varying degrees of distribution.
Just to add to what Kate said as well, Councillor Cubitt, yes, it is. I have to agree with you. Yes, it's wrong. It's disproportionate. We have been fighting at every level. I mean, I've spoken obviously with directors at BDBC, at Hampshire. Our officers have been engaging at various levels with Hampshire, and we did fight that case really, really hard. And I've also spoken to Roy Perry, and I believe the leader did as well. But yeah, I absolutely concede your point. It is disproportionate. It is a shame. We don't agree with the formula. We've done, I think, as much as we could. I would be very happy if we'd been able to do more, but I also take your point about devolution. It's something I think we need to look at, definitely.
As an aside, I think this is a food, something to think about. Looking at what the options are on what we're discussing this evening, the opportunity over 3 years to try and get the formula right for Basingstoke and Deane would be one of the lessons that we've got to strive to achieve. Because it then reflects the kind of needs that are required within this borough and not being influenced by external organisations. I'll throw that one in. Right, Councillor Smith.
Mine's a relatively more simple one, I hope. The third option of trying something new, can you just outline very simply for me the costs at the moment that we see from that? There's 750,000 from the thing, there's 111,000 from us. Is there more we're anticipating? I think it's coming back to Councillor James's point about what do we think the ongoing costs are likely to be, what's the sort of shortfall we're dealing with now, what do we think the ongoing liability is likely to be?
We believe that with the money that's coming to us from the county, we can shape the baseline. Colleague, Councillor, I'm sorry, I can't see your name, James, mentioned earlier. So we can cover our best estimates of need in terms of supported housing with the money coming from Hampshire, and we can test run our ideas in the first year in readiness for years 2 and 3. We can target and hone our resources more effectively, being meaner and leaner with how we do things. And we don't anticipate at this stage needing any more money to cover the costs of those services, the direct access hostel, the stage 2 hostels, the floating support and community-based support services. We might learn some things in the first year that will inform us for years 2 and 3, but we're not anticipating that we're going to need any more. Any more that would come in would be beneficial at this stage. Does that feel?
Is that a very nice way of saying 250,000?
If someone wanted to come forward with 250,000, it would be very well used. But I mean, 250,000 would help establish all sorts of things. But we've got the baseline necessities covered, we believe, in the future modelling for years 1, and then year 2 and 3. We think we can move forwards on. Does that help?
You made me chuckle there, Councillor Harvey, thank you. No, it's more of a question of going back to Councillor James' point, of us not necessarily want to be wholly reliant on the County Council. If at the end of those 3 years the funding were to be taken away, is 250,000 a year basically the figure that we're looking for from other sources?
We're hoping to attract the 750 from Hampshire for the next 3 years, and then our ambition would be that we generate sufficient income to maintain that type of level of service delivery, either through financial means or through community resources or through efficiencies or optimising ways of delivery or joint and pooled budgets. For example, in year 1 we may conduct a pilot of minimising hospital delays because of housing related issues at a certain cohort of people, and if we could prove, because we have the opportunity to pilot, which is what is exciting and innovating about this project, to our colleagues in health, that a housing resource would save X amount of money, then please would they consider putting into the pot. So there are those sorts of models that we can consider.
Councillor Laura James.
Thank you. Again, I've got quite a few questions, but the one I want to come back to is the one on the local connection. That you, throughout the report, the option, say looking at option 3, it excludes anyone who hasn't got a local connection. Is that right, or?
No, it would focus the resources on people who do have a local connection in the same way that it is at the moment. So people trying to get into May Place are prioritised, according to their need for the service, but also if you had five cases and only one of them had a Basingstoke connection, the Basingstoke connection would trump the place. But there's no exclusion necessarily, and obviously part of outreach work is around reconnection to areas where there are connections. So we're not talking about operating exclusions, it's all about priorities.
Can I also ask, in relation to option 3, have providers bought into option 3? Are they supporting this way forward?
So far, very positive. I very much think it's quite a refreshing alternative to some of the alternative tendering options that are out there for other aspects of the county's business on SPs. So at the moment, yeah, absolutely, because this is a sector that traditionally is always committed to ensuring that services are there for and sustainable for vulnerable service users.
And in relation to the changes under the Code of Guidance under the DCLG, in relation to vulnerability, how will this impact on demand or baseline, or have you got any indication of? I know it's a big question, sorry.
I think it focuses the mind. I mean, the whole issue about eligibility under homelessness and priority need is that it only comes into play when an application's been made to the local authority and an assessment has to be given. Well, one of the rationale behind getting this service for single homeless right is that they don't need to make a homeless application because you have that range of services there to respond to and deal with. So all the change in case law will mean is that some people, if they come to the point of making a homeless application, there's a different bar potentially in terms of whether or not they're likely to have a priority need. Our aspiration is that irrespective of whether or not they have that level of priority need, because it still is nonetheless a very high bar, you've got the range of single homelessness services functioning in a way that ultimately single homeless applications to the local authority wouldn't be as necessary.
Sorry, may I just add, the other thing that we're keen to do is look a lot more at the preventative agenda. There's two areas of prevention within this model, and there needs to be a lot more weight given to people at risk of even entering services. And we can do that a lot in partnership with colleagues in education, in CAMS, in criminal justice. So there's prevention at the early stage and supporting troubled families programme, and then there's prevention for people who have been in and out and sofa surfing and rough sleeping in and out of Camrose and Mayplace House, and how do we help people break that cycle. So And this isn't a criticism of the existing programme for supporting people, but there isn't necessarily as much flexibility to tailor resources where you need to put them. And a Basingstoke pilot would enable us to really be wise and smart about how we use intelligence that's there already, and then target our resources so we cut our cloth to... I can never finish that saying, but thank you.
Councillor James, I've got other people to ask questions. You've had 6 questions now, and I'd like to move on to Councillor Loomy and then to Councillor Frost. They'll come back to you later. Lomi, okay, I'll get it. Loney, I'll get it right sometime.
Actually, mine's not a question, you'll be pleased to know, Kate. Mine is about clarification, and Kate said that we did very well out of a Hampshire County Council when supporting people came in. We did not do well at all. What we got, every one of the, I think we're called third sector now, I don't know what I was called then, but every one of the people in different housing associations for special needs or whatever, we had to spend hours and hours and hours of transferring the people who were on community care monies into these particular forms, which were horrendous. So they didn't give us anything. We had to prove that what the money they were going to give us were actually for the named people, and every month we had to do paper upon paper to prove we were delivering what we said we'd deliver. So I just wanted to clarify, Hampshire County Council didn't give us anything more than we were actually entitled to as a borough. Sorry, Kate, but I just had to get that out.
Thank you for that. Just clarification. No, appreciate it. Thank you. Councillor... No, we got clarifications all night. I'll come back to you, Councillor Cubitt. You'll be on the list. Councillor Frost, he's been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for a fantastic report. It was certainly quite a lot more detail and has moved on quite a bit since the map, so thank you for that. In the last map meeting, I did say that I was very concerned about timescales. I am still concerned about timescales, and I would just like some reassurance that we're still going to be able to pick up and support and deliver all the support to the relevant people who need it as of the end of March.
Councillor Frost, Councillor James mentioned how much had we been engaging with providers, and it was a really useful point. We've met with providers at least 4 times since April. I intend to meet again with providers to map out a ghost proposal of what we would like to be suggesting to Cabinet in the business case of what year 1 might look like, and years 2 and 3 would evolve. And I would like to meet with providers, and I've got meetings in the diary in the next couple of weeks to just map out with them the feasibility of what we're hoping to achieve. And the purpose of that would mean that if we had approval at Cabinet at the end of September, that we could go live with those real-time discussions with people being on the same page in October, which gives 3 months more run-in than you would get usually through contracting with Hampshire County Council, where you would maybe get only 3 months to deliver a project. So we're hopeful, even though the timescales are tight, that we may be as advanced as we could be on that.
Thank you, Chair. No supplementary.
Councillor Cubitt.
I merely wanted to say that what Councillor Loney just said reaffirms my point about the fact that the evidence completely demonstrates that the current formula is wrong.
I think that that's accepted round the table. And I'll emphasise again, my personal view now, I'm not expressing a view for the committee at all, is that option 3 gives us a chance to get it right. I really do. And especially with the timescales that have just been mentioned by Corinne. Councillor Ms. James.
Can I ask, in relation to option 3, where Sale is at the moment supporting 11 people with complex needs, will that be picked up under the new modelling? Obviously those people came from Sandringham Court and have got real complex needs. I just wondered, will they fit within the new floating support services still? Or are they, where are they at the moment, those people?
We are hoping that through discussions and negotiations with providers, we can continue to capture those with the most severe and pressing need, moving from current Hampshire model to Basingstoke model in year one, whilst we review together, maybe in a partnership with other colleagues who would work in association with those people, how we best manage and meet and respond to the needs and risks of people that you're referring to. So we're hoping very much that that would form part of a future targeted floating support or outreach provision in association with the same provider in year one. Yeah.
Can I say, just in relation to that, I really think that's important that we, I really stress that I am really concerned about those people with complex needs and how we move forward, and that worries me that in the report it's sort of very vague, and I welcome what you're saying, but I am concerned going forward. And what if, in relation to as a risk, probation or the police or whoever else or drug service don't pick up, or health don't come in and help fund, that service? Is it the borough is then going to have?
Part of the work I've been doing has been having conversations with CRC, police, to start forming those relationships and those partnerships to ensure that we coordinate our resources around people who we know we most need to target, A, for their well-being and longevity, but B, for the impact that their chaotic lifestyles may have on others, so we can be smart with how we respond to those people. Does that help?
Another question is in relation to option 3, does that secure the severe weather provision going forward? And also, does it also allow for funding to be able to accommodate no second night out? Is that still something that this will be able to address?
Yes, the SWEP would be a specific requirement, whereas it wouldn't be if we went in with the county model necessarily. No second night out is about an approach to ensuring that people who are at risk of becoming endemic rough sleepers don't become so. That's about the way that we approach the services. So that would underpin the basis on which we structure those services anyway. So I don't envisage that would make any difference. What I just would want to emphasise is that option 3 gives us arguably a better template and a footprint for actually establishing better service delivery at a local level. It's not necessarily going to guarantee that all support needs in the future will always be met necessarily, but it's about having a baseline service. So it's about giving us the best opportunity that we can within the resources available.
Final question is in relation to the homeless man that's in the park tonight, who's sort of in the shelter there. Just you don't have to go into details, but are you aware of him? And just it's quite concerning seeing him in the sleeping bag there. I didn't say. I said I'm just bringing it to your attention, and it's very relevant tonight that we've got a homeless man that's in the shelter there tonight.
Can I make a comment? I came back from the station the other day and there was a rough sleeper in a doorway, just as at this sort of place. First person I called was the housing department. I was standing there. 2 response wardens came straight out. And I happened to do another little circuit because of what I was doing. Came back and I met the response officers. They know exactly who's out there. And I said, was there anything that they could do? They said, no, it's okay. He's happy. Not doing anybody any harm. The system here works very, very well. And I hope you rang the housing department about that particular rough sleeper, because that's what I do when I go out around the town.
Chair, I was just walking into the meeting and I've just raised it with the senior management officer. I know we raise this each time, but if you want to carry on bullying me, it's fine. I can deal with it.
Yeah, fine. You report it. Fine. Isn't that? That's the thing we all do. That's what we do as councillors. Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, it's the actions and results you want to go with it, isn't it? Let's just raise the issue if I can. I'd really appreciate just to understand in my own mind. the financial side of it. I mean, I totally appreciate the level of work that's gone into this and the effort that's from all sides, really, from the map as well as officers to get this far. What I'm trying to get my head around is a number of the questions tonight from others that have asked around the financial element. From what I understand, obviously starting out on page 16 of 59, when we had the pre-14-15 spend, we've already lost a series of services. I mean, there's already been cuts effectively to the supporting people services that others have seen and had over many years. You've then got services that have been commissioned out to HCC Children's Services, and then you're left with the residual amount that you were talking about, particularly that you've secured. What I'm trying to understand is, where do we stand with, for example, those services not being picked up by Children's Services? Where do we stand with those elements that are falling through the gap? And I guess the bit that struck my mind was the Joshua Tree comment in here, that it will not be funded out of this money, and county's stipulation almost that it will not be funded. So some of these, and I appreciate you describe it as a baseline, services are either going to be lost completely, try to be funded in a different way. And I know you talk about, lean and mean and the rest of it, but in a sense that we've pared down the baseline so far, and I'm conscious of where that takes us to, and then trying to sustain the funding in the future. Your comments about the 3-year funding, particularly then if we're looking to business and the voluntary sector, even to fund the baseline, let alone where we were literally a couple of years ago, 18 months ago. And I find that quite shocking. But could you just reassure me about where we perhaps stand with those children's services? Those are the ones, for example, a mental health or learning difficulty that are not necessarily covered in here, or are they and I'm not seeing it?
Page 10 of 59, 5 of 17 of the report sets out the current range of services and what the implications are for each of those. So some of those we know Sandringham Court has closed. We've talked about Sale. Some of them will be part of the mental health review. Joshua Tree, as we've already indicated, has no future, but it's one that we're mapping out. Group homes we've talked about as well. And in terms of the young person services, there has been a change as the commissioning responsibility changed to children's services. We also, if you're aware, joint contracted with children's services to top up that service availability, so there is still a comparable level of accommodation-based support services for young people. So over and above what's actually set out on that table, if there's other particular services you're concerned about, then we can, I think we've covered most of them, but yeah, okay.
I mean, you've answered my point. I guess the issue is we're certainly not looking to restore or in any way, shape or form maintain that which was. We're having to simply deal with trying to save the baseline. And I guess that's my concern, because there's a lot of people that will fall through that, or may not get the support they once did, or may still need. And again, that brings us around to Councillor Cubitt's and others' comments this evening, that we were very good at identifying need, and you were very good at justifying the reason why we were asking county for the money we were asking them for. It is there, if you like, totally. They just don't get it, and it doesn't seem to me they do get it for us in Basingstoke, and they've left us in this situation. And I find that shocking. I really find that shocking, coming from the provider in the way.
Fine. That was a comprehensive questioning of the officers. I think what it's done is give us a much deeper understanding. The report was pretty comprehensive. I couldn't agree more, and especially with what we've gleaned over the last year. Now into debate. I'd like to call your attention to the recommendations. We're looking for the views of the committee on each, if you need to have an opinion on each of the 3 options outlined in section 4. That's what we're here for this evening, so that the officers and the portfolio holder can progress this. And first is Councillor Harvey, followed by Councillor Cubitt.
Forgive me, Chair, I've forgotten to ask one small question. 14 of 59, halfway down the page, it talks about identifying and optimising mutual cross-cutting corporate priorities, including top-of-town regeneration. And I was just wondering what the officers had in mind by that comment, halfway down the page on 14 of 59. I don't know whether Terry's, because Terry's got the other side of the portfolio.
Yes, thank you. I think it's referring to the fact that we see a direct impact on the top of town with street homeless and street drinking. So any service that we can pick up, which which, if you like, will actually take those people into some kind of accommodation, get them off the streets, or get them moving on to some kind of independent living, has a direct impact on that sector as well.
Debate. Councillor Cubitt.
Well, I think, it's not for me to speak for other people, but I think that we've had an excellent meeting this evening, and I move that we propose that we support option 3 on the basis of the comprehensive report we've had and the answers we've had from the Cabinet member, for which I'm extremely grateful she's here, because going forward I think it's essential that portfolio holders are here, and I don't know whether the rest of the committee agree.
Well, there's a comment about option 3, because I'm trying to get a consensus here. Are there any more comments on the other options? I think most of them are making nice noises about option 3, because it's a good flexible way forward, as I perceive it anyway. Are there any more comments on 1 and 2? Councillor James.
I'm slightly cheating because I support option 3 as well. I just wanted to comment that option 1 and 2 are rubbish. But what I also wanted to add, that was just my way in. What I really wanted to add is it's a transitional thing. We are picking up services. Now, unlike perhaps a lot of the elderly people services we were talking about last year, which are kind of predictable because people do get old, vulnerable people is dynamic. It changes every minute, every day. The people who needed intensive needs a few months ago are now off working, and we can't believe the change in them. Equally, we know tomorrow morning someone will walk through the door with a unique set of problems that we've got to deal with it. And when we're taking on this service at a time of cuts, and there's outside providers whose contracts are coming to an end, we're relying on other services, some of them government funded, which have got their own changing budgets. I think it's very important that the borough make sure they're able to meet the needs of that dynamic group. Now, when we refurbish the MALs, we have a contingency budget just in case things go wrong. Whenever we do any piece of work, Basing View has a contingency. We always have a contingency, and every year we are told how important it is that we have a risk reserve, a reserve for this and a reserve for that. So I just think that the message to send to the Cabinet through the portfolio holder is there should be some contingency fund to make sure that we do if someone falls through a crack, we can fix it, we can repair it. So there needs to be a generous contingency budget to help us develop the pilot and make sure the pilot is successful and we come out with good answers and nobody misses out whilst we're testing new things.
I think the portfolio holder has an answer for you. Comment?
Yes, we do have a 4.5 million homelessness reserve, which we have put aside as a contingency. So hopefully we can make some of that available as things move forward.
I'm getting nothing else. Would the committee agree that option 3... All right. When I start speaking, I'll note that you want to speak, but I'm trying to introduce a common conclusion here at the moment. If you are objecting to the common conclusion, let's hear your view. Councillor Mr. James. Okay.
I put my hand
No,
up to
I'm trying to
speak.
run a committee.
We're in open debate.
I put my hand up to speak. Stop
All right.
bullying me. Stop bullying me. The chair is bullying me yet again. Stop bullying me.
I'm trying to conclude
Bullying.
the
Are you
meeting.
ready? I
Councillor
put my
Mrs.
hand to
James.
speak. Wait, if you want me to speak later, that's fine. You tell me when you're ready.
Councillor Mr. James.
Thank you. I'd like to comment on option 3, which I think is the best way forward. I have concerns, in relation to the funding that we're losing, and it's not ideal. And again, like Councillor James has said, I have concerns about the risk. My concerns is, and I'm glad there is a contingency, but is the expectation which the report makes reference to. If after 3 years, county pull that funding, it's how is it envisaged that we will then pick that up, or what is how are you going to build in expectation in relation to providers, and that concerns me in a sense. But in a sense, we're going to have to pick this up anyway. But does it allow for county to move away from their responsibility? Are we, by doing what we're doing, letting them renege in 3 years' time on this additional money? That worries me. And the other thing is, at what point does this come back to us as a committee. So this goes to Cabinet in September. Will we get to see it before that, the report, or will it, at what stage does this come back, or does it go back to the map, or I just don't know, how's it going to work? Thank you.
Yes, there's not time for it to come back before Cabinet, and we have to get it to Cabinet, as you're aware, because we've got to get this through so that we have time to shape the Joshua Tree service in the very least. But the map will be ongoing, and the engagement that we've had with members over the last year will continue, because obviously we haven't got a solution immediately. We've got to shape that, and the involvement of members is vital in that, so we'll continue with that.
And on that basis, with the map running, it can always come back to this committee. So, at whatever suitable time. So the vehicle is always there. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to see if you were going to treat me the same, actually.
I wouldn't dare.
Yeah, indeed, you wouldn't dare, would you? Halfway through you were speaking. The points I wanted to make, really, regard the devolution agenda and just the comments that were passed about, and it was an interesting comment that was passed earlier. Well, it wasn't meant as a giveaway line, but it was an important one. Local government sustaining these services is not sustainable. That was the line that came out earlier. I understand why we've got option 3 on the table. I understand why there's a cross-party view on this. You can see in terms of the conversation that's been had. But my concern about this is also the general direction the county is going in. If we accept the devolution that they're giving us, and we accept the reduced budgets that they're giving us, and we accept the level of responsibility and the political risk that goes with that, and I don't mean party political risk, I mean political risk to the borough in that context, then a significant weight of responsibility then rests on our shoulders to deal with what are increasingly and incredibly complex issues. And I respect our officers' expertise in this respect. I respect colleagues' expertise in this area. And I really do see the fact that we do have a lot of talent sat around the table to help on this, but nonetheless, we're forever paring down. We're forever retrenching. We're forever going back from a position of what was strength and what was significantly evidence need following very good services. I mean, these were really good services that were being delivered in this borough. These were really good organisations, groups, voluntary, charitable, third sector, housing associations. Some of the stuff that was going on in this borough was absolutely brilliant and still is. But my concern is with the devolution agenda and going with option 3, it doesn't let county off the hook, but what it does give to county is, you guys deal with it, and then if it all goes pear-shaped, we aren't responsible, and we will pick up and cut in 3 years' time. Now, I am absolutely confident, and I am sure that round this table and with the Cabinet and with whoever that might be in the future, because this isn't just going to be in a couple of years, this is a long-term commitment, that we will do the very best we can. My problem still remains. This is what, 29% off of the budget if you take children's services, or 44% if you take the top. That is a huge cut. I mean, we're not just talking 10% here, like government would take off of a devolution agenda to a district, or to like the other city deals that are going on. This is a 44% potential cut to one of the most important budgets and some of the most important people we have in the community who genuinely need support. Now, for me, that is a really difficult moral thing to deal with, let alone just the simple financial baseline figures. So when colleagues are talking here about we're going to try and save the baseline, we're going to save what we can in the context of that, again, I struggle. Because I'm thinking, where have we come from to now look at what we're having to deal with? And I really, really think that's wrong. The other aspect to it is the danger of relying on voluntary sector charities and businesses yet again to plug a hole. And the Camrose do a tremendous job, we all know that. But there is some of this is statutory and some of this should be statutory. So again, I think there is a very critical role for local government, and I would not want to see so much pressure come on the voluntary, charitable and business sector that they were left holding this. We have got a role to step up, and if it is going to cost us money, then we are one of the richest boroughs in the country. I would like to see us, and we are, I'm not saying we're not, and I think we need to give that commitment, and over the long term really, to make this sustainable, because that's the other aspect to it. It's how can we help sustain people in a good quality of life and living that they would expect with very vulnerable and complex needs.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, and it's useful to be reminded of potential pitfalls on the way. Can I take it that the committee basically supports option 3 with all the comments that we've got on board tonight. And this can go forward to the portfolio holder and the Cabinet. Thank you very much. There's only one more item on the agenda, and that's the work programme. This is paper C on the agenda, because that's Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, there doesn't seem to be any reference to the pollution monitoring of the Loddon on the work programme, because that was, we discussed.
It's under the main, things to be timetabled at the back, and it's not item 4, I believe.
Okay, so you just haven't incorporated it in the timetable yet?
Correct. No, that's why we have that list, because as the programme rolls on, when we see a gap and sufficient notice to the officers, that's something we can put onto the agenda. Councillor Smith.
On the basis of tonight's discussion, I kind of assume it goes without saying that it would come back anyway, but I'd just like to ensure that we start to timetable an opportunity to have a look at the Basingstoke way of this new housing model, whatever it may be. I.e. the item we've just discussed and what's coming forward from it.
Option 3, yeah, making about the map. The map will continue. It will continue for the foreseeable future to actually have a look at the progress of all this. At any particular time, if it's for whatever reason, it can be brought back to this committee. So the map will roll forward. Councillor Harvey?
Just picking up that point, I'm guessing, 24th of the 9th, the homelessness COG2 outcomes and debate would overlap quite significantly, as the Cabinet members just said. So
it's not going to be there.
And you're moving it.
Removing it, yeah, on that basis, because it's going to be a continual monitoring process as far as this committee is concerned.
So how does the report back work then? Is it simply via the map? Because the map isn't public, it's not minuted.
No, the map will trigger off that being referred straight back to this committee. And that's how the member involvement will continue. And if we get any red flags up, because the officers are always there at the map, then it will come straight back to this committee. And it's just an ongoing process, yeah.
Bearing in mind the publication, the moving forward of the right to buy, the purchasing of housing association homes, that's now moving apace. Is that work with the task group to be taken forward now in order that that can come to an agenda in the future? Is that
I think,
relevant way
yeah,
is that what you mean, perhaps, by work? And
well, yes, that scoping group, I quite frankly don't know what is going along that line, because even the housing associations don't know, is what I've been fed. And until they get something from central government in any kind of detail, that's when we would bring it back. Okay, if they do. Well, that information needs to be fed back to the officers, who will feed it back through into the committee. Councillor Cubitt.
I mean, your comment, Chair, about them not knowing is correct, actually, because the news today is that the opposition peers have tabled an amendment, so it's been rejected. So the government's draft paper has been rejected on the grounds that the housing associations, in their amendment, can't sell houses that have been given as donations by companies or individuals. So it's very relevant that it's not fixed yet. So it's probably not any point in discussing the implications of that paper until it's been approved by the second house.
And that's why I said there's a lot of uncertainty. I'll wait till the official sort of instruments are prepared and passed down to local government before we get too much involved. Councillor Mr. James.
It's just on that one, because I was one of those people that was named to go on that scoping group. I'd just like to know who's leading on it and when are we going to...
I've offered. It hasn't been accepted. I've a vote.
I didn't know we had to accept it, do we? No, you first volunteer.
Anyway, so what I was saying is, can we set a date and meet to move forward on this scoping? If Paul is then now leading on it, that would be great.
I know we're Joe. Chair, I know we're Joe I know we're joking, but our local housing associations are concerned about this in conversation with them, and it is an important issue, and it will affect thousands, it will affect hundreds of houses, the amount of the stock, the volume of stock that we have in this borough. So it's a very relevant issue for this council to examine. And yes, if you're saying that the task group can go ahead, and if this committee is agreeing and would like me to lead on it, I would be very happy to.
Yes, we do have a constituent membership of this group, and Councillor Harvey, formally, if you want me to say it here, go ahead. I'm not quite sure on what basis you will go ahead without instruments coming down from central government, because it's a central government issue. And I understand that Stefan has already requested that you set a date. As far as the rest of the work programme is concerned, I assume you've all got the paperwork for Thursday evening this week. Okay, nothing has changed there. And September, I've got nothing more from September that's other than what's in paper C. And we're going to be looking for anything around the 26th of November meeting. Now, Councillor Cubitt will talk to the officers and see if they could start thinking about possibly your pollution monitoring the River Loddon, see when they think that they could timetable that. One that has been homelessness we've already addressed. Tendering and contracts. Now that's an outstanding, more a presentation to this committee about the way that tendering and contracts are dealt with within the borough. We can ask the officers, I think now, to re-timetable that, because we've had to postpone it because of other issues that came up, the elections and everything else, and more higher priority things such as this evening. And the housing strategy, that's gone through Cabinet and Council, but that is more, we keep it on the back burner. We keep it as a topic heading so we don't forget it, and must come back to this committee. I think as things go forward on what we've been talking about tonight, homelessness and everything else, right to buy will incorporate some review of the housing strategy. So, we'll keep all that going. Yes, Councillor Cubitt.
Have we discussed recently parking charges? Because it's been obviously quite high profile in the papers recently, and the impacts. Would it come to our committee if we were to add that, or would it be on someone else's committee papers?
It's somebody else's committee. I think it's fees and charges. That's already gone through this year, hasn't it? Yes.
Yes, they've gone up.
They've gone through this committee. Sorry, I didn't make myself
they've
clear.
gone through the roof in our car parks, that's the point.
I will go back to it, but I think the cycle of that comes up towards the end of the year, beginning of the new year.
I think October, November.
October, November.
Yeah. Because they've got to be agreed before you...
Because it goes into the budget in February, yeah. So it'll be at the end of the year. I had a feeling it came up in another committee. I know scrutiny was going to look at it as well, because I remember, Councillor, we were talking about it in the work programme for scrutiny, which is coming up tomorrow night. I'll get a clarification for you. Yeah, running through the items to be timetabled, you've got number 6, right to buy. Well, that's been taken care of on the scoping group. And on Thursday, we might hear a bit more about top of town, and that will include things like empty shops. So, pardon me? And parking.
And parking costs, there's a link.
Yes.
There is a very profound link between empty shops.
Yes, I heard the debate on national news today. It's a topic everywhere. It's not unique to the Basingstoke. Okay, any more comments on the work programme? You happy with that? Right, nothing more. I declare the meeting closed at 8:05.